Jennifer. I see Jennifer, but I do not hear Jennifer.
I think audio is still connecting. There we go. Yeah, now we should hear you.
Okay. Is that better?
That is better, yes.
Much better.
We have, we're running 3 different businesses off our home internet. So.
I'm only running one business off the home internet, but with all 4 children home and the gamer in the basement, I'm experiencing a lot of challenges. So I went into the office today.
You're gonna have to give them a set time frame.
For those that are joining, we're going to give it 2 more minutes. We'll start at 3:03, and we will do intros at that point. So thank you. Just stand by. There is a Q&A bubble at the bottom of your window. So if throughout the presentation you have questions, you may submit them via that Q&A chat channel, and we will have a Q&A section at the end.
I see someone who was asking if this will be recorded.
Good question. I see that. Yes, it will. It is being recorded, and so we will make that available afterwards. All right. Okay. Give it 1 more minute. Hi there, Silas Talley from Revan and Ambitious Games, saying hello on the chat. Your names there. Okay, 3:03, we're going to get started with an introduction. We'll let people join as they go. Hello and welcome to all of you. Thank you for your interest and your participation in today's event. My name is Keith Glendon. I'm the founder of Lucid Coast, and we are an innovation services company in Marquette, Michigan. We're going to keep the introductions to kind of a minimum because we want the focus to be on our featured speaker today, Mr. Richard Sheridan of Menlo Innovations. Truly excited and grateful to have him with us today. And this event marks the official launch of the Michigan Virtual Founders Club. And today you get to participate in the start of our MVP, our minimum viable product. The product in this case is really community. And the idea for the Michigan Virtual Founders Club arose from a lot of discussions, interaction between startup founders and entrepreneurs and digital economy innovators around our state. And primarily in rural areas, but also in rural, urban, and emerging markets. In Silicon Valley, you can't throw a latte across the room without being a startup founder. But in Marquette, Michigan, or Traverse City, or Gaylord, or Perrinville, it can be a much lonelier and on your own pursuit. And so what we've found as startup founders is that one of the most valuable things to us early stage founders is inspiration, encouragement, and early stage and supportive community. So, sometimes you can feel crazy or alone or up against impossible odds. And so some of us thought, why not create sort of a virtual Silicon Valley community for all of those of us who are working to create the future here in Michigan? In addition to these quarterly events, we're going to have community resources, collaboration tools, startup-oriented content, and ways to find and engage with connections that we all tend to need along the way. Goal really is to create a by founders, for founders community to help founders improve their probability of success. And this is a not-for-profit initiative. Our intention is to work closely with ecosystem partners throughout the state to meet that goal. So with that, I'd like to also quickly introduce 2 of those ecosystem partners and highlight them as our co-hosts for this inaugural event. One is TC New Tech in Traverse City, and one is Innovate Marquette Smart Zone here in Marquette, Michigan. These are 2 organizations serving startup ecosystems in Northern and Upper Michigan. So I'll start by introducing Jennifer Zonko, Executive Director of TC New Tech, and Ray Johnson, CEO of Innovate Marquette Smart Zone, for a few brief words. So Jennifer?
Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate you getting us all together. At TC New Tech, we firmly believe that collaboration is what is going to support us all, and what is going to help us to succeed in the future. And that's what we're all about, is bringing together startups with other key components like investors to help them launch.
Very good. And Ray?
Thanks, Keith. Glad to be part of this and supporting it. You know, I know fundamentally that entrepreneurs learn from other entrepreneurs. Having been a serial entrepreneur myself and a founder of companies that we've taken from concept to commercialization, it's really important to have a network of mentors and supporters. And so I applaud this effort. The Smart Zone here in Marquette stands ready to help entrepreneurs and innovators and inventors with their ideas. You know, what we firmly believe is that all ideas are worth exploring, whether it's high tech, low tech, or no tech. We have a one-stop shop that you can connect with us either by phone or email or stopping by when we can actually have meetings and be able to have a team of folks that can help you move your idea from concept to commercialization and ultimately to launch. So glad to be here and look forward to attending others in the future.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks, Jennifer. And now, without further ado, we're very pleased and honored to present to you Rich Sheridan, founder, CEO, and Chief Joy Officer at Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor. Rich is the author of Joy Incorporated and Chief Joy Officer, and we all think you're going to find him a refreshing voice and face of inspiration in this challenging and uncertain time. So, Rich, welcome and thank you.
You bet. Great to be with you all. Given most of you, I think, are coming from the Upper Peninsula in the audience, I just want to let you know I have a very special affection for the Upper Peninsula. In fact, most of you won't know me, but you'll absolutely probably know my brother, Brian Sheridan, who's a lawyer in Ishpeming. He claims that all roads lead to Ishpeming. This may be further proof of that. So I think Brian is actually in on this today. So welcome, brother Brian. Hope to see you soon. So today I want to talk about intentional culture, and I want to make a case for joy inside of that culture. Rollo May, the famous psychologist, once stated that the opposite of courage is not cowardice, but conformity. And I will say we are living in times where conformity probably isn't going to cut it for us. So what I want to share with you today is that I believe there is, in fact, a non-conforming place in our company's cultures around joy and even love. And so I'm going to share with you the things that I've learned over the 19 years that we've been running Menlo and some of the things that came to me along the way. Give you a little bit of background on my personal history, just so you know where this came from. I didn't just wake up one day and suddenly think that joy was a great idea. I started out as a programmer way back in 1971. I was just a kid then, a freshman in high school. My high school down in Macomb County, Michigan, offered computer science for the very first time, and I took it, and I was hooked, and I knew what I wanted to do the rest of my days. By 1973, I had typed all the Major League Baseball players into the computer so my friends and I could play baseball in the cold Michigan winter months, our favorite teams playing against one another. I would always want to have Al Kaline on my team. I was very sad when we lost him this year. And that program that would now be termed fantasy baseball, and my life is probably littered with lost opportunities like that. But that program actually won an international programming contest and launched a career for me because the Macomb Intermediate School District that was supplying us the computing power came to me after I'd won the contest. They wanted to see the kid who got the feather in the cap of the county school system. And the guy running that program asked me a question that I'll never forget. He said, "Do you want to come work for me?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "Programming." And I was stunned. I thought, really? You can get paid for doing this? This is amazing. This thing I love to do as a hobby. And that launched a career for me before I could even drive a car. I eventually went to the University of Michigan, got a couple of degrees in computer science and computer engineering, and launched a career. And the path that followed, I will tell you, looked perfect. You know, graduating in 1982 was the first big tech explosion. That's when the PC came out. So here I was 11 years into knowing how to code. I'd gotten 2 degrees. I was pretty good at this. I was passionate about it. I loved it. And the industry was about to just burgeon. I couldn't have had a better setup for success, and success followed me. At least the way the world measures success. Raises, stock options, promotions, greater team size, authority, bigger office, all that stuff followed me. Eventually, I got all the way up to VP of R&D for what would become the #1 public company in Michigan in 1999 based on stock growth, a company called Interface Systems. That stock went from $2 a share to 80 almost overnight. And so I had it all. My parents were very proud of me. My wife was happy with the life we were affording. Can you hear the but inside of all of this? There was a different line, and it was far more important to me. And that line looked like this. By my mid-30s, my heart was breaking for a profession that I thought would carry me for a lifetime, and I wanted out. I had planned an escape route at this point. I was thinking maybe I just abandon it all, move up to the boundary waters of Minnesota and start a canoe camp. There's probably going to be people on this call who are right there with me and they want to know how far I got with that business plan. But how could it be that I had all this sort of great outside looking success, being rewarded handsomely for it, being recognized every step of the way? You're doing a good job. And yet my heart was breaking. Well, I'll tell you, in the software industry, you probably know this. Software companies, software departments inside of IT departments, they often operate in chaos. It is typically a land of phones ringing off the hook with problems, people pulling all-nighters. I used to come home after very long days and my wife would ask me, honey, did you get a lot done today? And tired me would look at her and say, no, I got nothing done today. I was busy from one end of the day to the other and I just didn't get anything done. And I will tell you, if you operate in that kind of chaos for too long, bad things happen, negative events happen. In my first book, I write about an event that happened in our industry. Fortunately, it wasn't my event, but a tired programmer made a simple software update error on their New York Stock Exchange trading platform at Knight Capital Group. And that stock trading platform in the next 45 minutes traded $7 billion worth of securities it wasn't supposed to, costing Knight Capital Group $400 million in losses in 45 minutes. I'm guessing you're all with me that $400 million in losses in 45 minutes, no matter where you're working, is probably a negative event. And when that happens, the corporate machine plows in. It starts writing big binders full of templated documents and procedures to make sure these errors don't happen again. They put project management office police forces in charge of just minding these sort of non-value add documents. And you quickly go from chaos to bureaucracy. You go from the land of never getting anything done to, quite frankly, the land of never getting anything started. Because you're waiting for an approval, a sign off, a committee to meet, a policy to be written. And yet in the tech industry, stuff still needs to happen. So shadow groups form. People start learning how to placate the bureaucracy while continuing to operate in chaos. And this was my life. This is where I was living back in the 80s and 90s. This has been going on for a long time. And I'll be honest, I thought it was only me. And as I peeked out, I realized, no, everybody's suffering from this. And typically what happens after a while, when you're stuck in that waiting place of bureaucracy, people start to wake up and say, you know what? Maybe we don't need that. And of course, we love our acronyms in the software industry. We don't need that software development lifecycle heavy process. Let's create a lighter process, SDLC light, for little projects, short projects, quick projects, just a few stapled together forms. But even those forms don't get signed, those committees don't meet, those approvals don't happen. So eventually somebody says, I don't know, let's get rid of all this stuff. Let's declare we're agile or we're lean now or something like that. And usually all that means is, let's go back to chaos, because chaos at least feels busy. And this was my life, back and forth this picture was running. And I didn't want to be there. So there I was, stuck, wanting a way out, thinking about canoe camps, but realized I probably am not going to support my wife and 3 daughters with that. And my wife still laughs at me to this day when I talk about this. So I decided I was stuck in a room full of manure and my eternal optimist kicked in. I knew there was a pony in this room somewhere. And I'll tell you, in these troubling times that we're in, I was just on a Zoom call with my whole team right now. And I told them, I said, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And they said, Rich, you know what to do. Look for the pony. Look for the pony. We'll help you dig the manure. So they love this story too. But back then, my journey out led me to authors and books, but not books on technology, books on culture, on teamwork, on systems thinking, a whole different way to organize humans. Because I realized in my moment of despair, this challenge I faced was not a technical challenge. It was, how do we organize our people challenge? How do we foster a culture that doesn't need to operate in chaos and doesn't need the seeming comfort of bureaucracy that typically just involves CYA tactics and ability to point the finger of blame at somebody else rather than yourself, rather than wanting to succeed. And all of these books were telling me there was a better way of doing things. Book like Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of building a learning organization, Tom Peters' book, In Search of Excellence, Peter Drucker's books on management. All of these books were pointing me to a better way, but they didn't tell me how to get there. It wasn't until a book I read in 1999 by another programmer, a guy named Kent Beck, and he talked about something he dubbed extreme programming. Not about programmers jumping off of cliffs with bungee cords or anything like that, just a different way to organize a software team. And I saw a video on an industrial design firm out in California. Nightline had done an episode on IDEO, the famous industrial design firm. And those two things, that book and that video, gave me what I call a click moment, that moment where suddenly everything snaps into place and I knew exactly where I was going, and I even knew how I was going to get there. And over the next 2 years, between 1999 and 2001, I reinvented a public company, a tired public company, one that needed reinvention. And I'd probably still be there to this day. But those of you who remember 2001, that was when the internet bubble burst. And suddenly hundreds of thousands of people like me were out of work, including me. I had to lay off my whole team and then lay me off. And so I came home and told my wife I'd lost my job in 2001. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, You're unemployed now? And I said, no, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now. Hang on to that one. You may need it someday. It took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment. And by then we started turning a profit and generating revenue and all that kind of stuff. So, but in 2001, I lost everything. I lost office, paychecks, stock options, everything gone except for one thing. They couldn't take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And what I learned in those 2 years is what I want to share with you today. What I learned is this is not about finding the perfect setting dial for bureaucracy. What I learned is you can throw this picture away entirely and replace it with something else. And what we replaced it with is this intentionally joyful culture. And the metaphor I'm going to use is based on a hobby I have of flying little airplanes. I don't do it anymore, but I do have a pilot's license still. And what I want to do is compare the forces at work on a human organization to the forces at work on a small airplane, or any airplane for that matter. So even if you don't have a pilot's license like I do, or never studied aeronautics, I think everyone has a basic understanding of what gets a plane aloft and keeps it aloft. There is that force of lift created by the camber of the wings, the force, the countervailing force of weight that holds it down, the force of thrust that pulls us forward, and the force of drag that holds us back. And if I get my thumb on the right button, everything will work right. So here are the four basic forces that work on an aircraft. And if these aren't in the right balance, that plane's not getting off the ground. So what are the lines I can draw to a human organization? Well, there's that lift that we get of human energy. Something is probably one of the most squandered energy forces on the planet. The statistics have been clear for such a long time. The Gallup organization has been measuring disengagement for 50 years and it's been stuck at 60 or 70% of people disengaged at work. That is a squandering of our human energy inside of our workplaces. The weight that holds us down, the weight of bureaucracy, that heavy load of going to meetings, filling out forms, waiting for approvals, the thrust that pulls us forward, the thrust of purpose, understanding why we exist, who do we serve, what would delight look like for them, and the drag that typically holds us back is the drag of fear. And I'm not talking about the things we should be afraid of. You know, I think there's a lot of things right now we should be afraid of. I'm talking about using fear as a tool to motivate others, creating artificial fear in order to motivate. So what are some examples? How can we lift the human energy of our team? There are many, many things we do at Menlo to do this, but I think in general, clarity over ambiguity, the ability to go to work and actually get meaningful things done, do meaningful work and actually get it done can really lift up the spirit and energy of your team. The weight that holds us down, the simplest term I can use is meeting load. You know, I think in large organizations, if you've been a part of large organizations, you've noticed that there's usually a layer of management from that layer and above to the top. Those people are typically human sacrifices to meetings. They're literally running from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next with barely any time to think between them. And, you know, if you really want to drag the human energy out of an organization, if you really want to weigh it down, when you have those meetings, don't make any decisions. And if perchance you happen to, by mistake, make a decision, just don't act on it. And you'll suck the life out of your organization. The thrust of purpose should be externally focused. This shouldn't be about me. It shouldn't even be about us. It should be about who do we serve? What would delight look like for them? And when I talk about it later, I'm gonna actually throw the standard 3 stakeholders off the table, external. I'm gonna take customers, employees, and even shareholders off the list when we think about the purpose of our organization. And the drag that holds us back is that micromanaging kind of fear. It can be as simple as an eye roll at a meeting or a heave of a breath. There are so many things that we do to generate fear within organizations. Think of the typical annual performance review process, for example. Ruins everyone's December in large organizations, right? Bosses and workers alike. And usually, you know, I can guarantee you nobody ever went into their annual performance review thinking to themselves, shrugging their shoulders and saying, yeah, I know, I pretty much just met expectations this year. No, everybody who goes into that performance review is thinking, I tore the cover off the ball today. This is my year. This is the year I exceeded expectations. And then the boss gets you in there and he or she says to you, well, you know, only 3.7% of you can exceed expectations this year. And, you know, quite frankly, 5 years ago, you got an exceed, so you have to wait your turn, right? And so I've saved up these 29 things you've done wrong over the whole year just to share them with you today. There are so many dumb things we do in our organization that promote fear inside of it. It's a wonder where our organizational aircraft ever gets off the ground. So what can we do? What can we do to get this plane off the ground? Well, I will tell you, we have to decrease fear. We'll probably never eliminate it. That would be unreasonable and probably irrational amount of work. We can decrease the weight of bureaucracy. We can do things that can lift up the human energy and increase people's understanding of the purpose of our organization. And if we do this, our little airplane can get off the ground every single day. And there is one other thing I want you to think about, and that is how our organization's designed. What systems are in place for this design? And I want to just share with you a couple of more pieces of aeronautical engineering here, because most of us understand the basis of how flight works, but I will simply say that it's also important to consider how the aircraft itself is designed. It is designed with certain things in mind. For instance, the wings are tilted up just a little bit on standard aircraft. Why? This gives us positive stability. This means when the aircraft is bumped around just a little bit, the pilot doesn't have to intervene. The system itself is designed to correct those minor disturbances. If you don't have that, you end up with catastrophic instability. And so when the plane starts bumping around, the pilot has to get so involved. And that's not true with regular aircraft. Those minor bumps and things that make your heart jump up into your throat are actually corrected by the design of the aircraft itself. And I'm going to suggest to you that we need to design the systems within our companies to offload the work of leadership by providing systems that are positively stable rather than catastrophically unstable. And then finally, there's one other too delicious a term in flying that I just can't resist to share with you. When you get rolling down the runway, when there's that moment that it hits just the right airspeed and the pilot pulls back on the yoke and you feel that moment where it just lifts off the ground, that angle of attack has a special name, and it's called a positive attitude. And when that positive attitude is applied, boom, off the ground we go. So don't discount the fact that just a little dose of positive energy that's brought in by the leaders every single day can have a tremendous impact on the spirit and energy of your team. A little bit of flight history to share that's kind of fun. Obviously, Orville and Wilbur Wright accomplished their amazing feat in 1903 in Kitty Hawk. Two guys working in a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. They were up against a really tough competitor in Samuel Pierpont Langley. He was well-funded government operation trying to accomplish the same thing, not quite using the same methods as the Wright brothers, not having the same degree of success. And what was interesting to me about this historical reference is that as soon as the Wright brothers succeeded, Langley quit. He just literally quit. He and his whole team, done. There was so much more to discover. Why would they quit at that moment? And I think it goes back to that purpose. You see, Langley was trying to be first. He wanted the glory of producing the first flyable aircraft. The Wright brothers had a different purpose. While Langley wanted to build an airplane, the Wright brothers wanted to fly. And I think if we understand those kind of basic purposes of why our organization exists and communicate them effectively to our team, we can have a tremendous outcome in the companies that we're leading, forming, and trying to grow. One other interesting note about this moment, shortly after this first powered flight, Orville Wright was quoted as saying man would never be able to build an aircraft that could carry more than 2 people. It just isn't physically possible. The weight of the people, the amount of fuel required, the size of the engine makes it impossible. 2 people, that's it. How do I know this? I read it in a book on Orville Wright's life. I read that book on a 747 to London. 400 passengers, 50,000 gallons of fuel, 35,000 feet, 500 miles an hour. So the point of this is, once we discover the relevant principles to drive either an aircraft or our organization forward, we can fly. We can lift the human energy of our team. We can fly to heights and distances that were previously unimaginable, maybe even for the people who first discovered these principles. So don't forget that these are powerful forces at work, that once we learn how to unleash them, we can really take our team places. So I want to share with you just a few lessons that I've learned along the way in hopes that you can take something from my learnings over the last 20 years. This is our organizational aircraft. This is Menlo. This was Menlo pre-pandemic, okay? We work in one big open room. We work shoulder to shoulder, 2 people, 1 computer, sharing a keyboard and mouse with one another. If you can imagine a more pro-COVID-19 environment, you probably won't find one other than this. We are now 100% remote. If I showed you a picture of this room, it would be the same thing, just minus all the humans, because we're all working remotely now. And if you want, we can talk about that in the Q&A afterwards. But the fact of the matter is, when you walk into this place, you can feel the human energy of the place, and that's very important to us. But if you had suggested to me when we started Menlo, if you had asked me, Rich, what do you think you might accomplish? I might have been like Orville Wright. I might have said, if we could get down to 1 or 2 emergencies a week, I think I would feel really good. But if somebody pushed me farther and said, well, what if you got it down to a couple a month? I'd be like, are you kidding? This is software. You can't get it down to 2 emergencies a month, no matter how good your process is. And they said, well, come on, what about 2 a quarter? What about 2 a year? Well, I'm happy to report that since we've begun Menlo. We haven't seen a software emergency since 2004. It's been almost 15 years since the last software emergency occurred. Again, I would have never believed that when we started Menlo. You couldn't have convinced me of that, just like nobody could have convinced Orville Wright about the 747. What's really interesting about the 747 is it first flew in 1969, a scant 20 years after Orville Wright passed away. Almost in the context of his lifetime, the 747 happened. So again, don't let go of what might be possible when you start making the right kind of changes in your organization. So what did we figure out along the way to build this culture of joyful leadership within our organization? Start with that purpose. Understand the fundamental answers to two key questions. Easier to ask than answer, I will tell you. Who do we serve, and what would delight look like for them? And like I said before, take your customers, your employees, and your shareholders off the table. Of course you have to serve them, but that's still self-serving. I want you to look past those stakeholders. For us at Menlo, we look to the users of the software we're designing and building for our customers. We're a custom software design and development firm. Ultimately, the people we serve are people we will never meet, who don't pay us for what we do, but will use the results of our effort every single day in their work lives or their home lives based on whatever the software is doing. And so to think about this in the context of your own organization, look downstream, look at who the people you serve. Imagine you're a life insurance company. The easy answer for who you serve might be your beneficiaries, but that might be your policyholders, but the more important answer is the beneficiaries, the people who never meet you, who don't even know you exist until the moment of truth occurs, and have never paid you a dime. But when they pick up that phone to call you, they're expecting compassion and understanding and probably execution and a big check. But preparing yourself for those you serve is what can really drive the purpose within your organization. Value leadership over hierarchical authority. Leadership is harder. Leadership without hierarchical position means you have to influence people because you can't just tell them what to do. It's a much better kind of leadership. You get a lot better buy-in from your team. Pursue systems thinking over bureaucratic thinking. Design your systems like I described earlier to create positive stability. Don't have this great meeting load. I will say, design systems where you are able to take action versus take a meeting, and you'll really energize your team. Care for the people who work for you. Care from top to bottom. There should be care systems in place for the top leaders all the way down to the frontline workers. If we're not caring for each other, we don't care about each other. Build a system where you're learning, constantly learning with each other. Boy, if there's ever a time for learning, we're all in it right now. If we aren't set to be trying new things, running new experiments, seeing what happens, adjusting as we go, we are probably going to get left behind. And then ultimately become storytellers. I will tell you what I've discovered over the years. My business card even says it right on there, Chief Storyteller of Menlo Innovations. I don't think there's a better fundamental act of binding together human beings than the kind of binding we can get from telling stories. Storytelling is as old as human civilization. Storytelling is what bound tribes and communities and nations together, whether it's stories captured in anthems and history books around campfires or totems. Understand that the stories you curate, stories both of challenging times and of great success, are the most important things to communicate to your team so you understand why we are all bound together as a community. I'll tell you one story from my life as to where do you begin this process? Because a lot of people ask me, Rich, there's so many people that have to change. Where do I start? And I will tell you that for me, the starting place was pointed to by my 8-year-old daughter, Sarah. That's not her and that's not me. But when she was 8, I took her to work with me on one of those take your child to work days. And she sat and watched her newly minted VP dad do VP work for a day. Can you imagine a more boring day for an 8-year-old than to watch a VP work, right? She wisely brought her coloring books and crayons and stickers, and she sat at my task table and watched the VP work all day while she filled out her coloring book. And at the end of the day, I thought, well, her teacher's going to ask tomorrow, so I better ask today. I said, Sarah, what'd you think? What did you see? What did you learn? And I thought I'd kind of get a, nothing. No. What she said changed me. She said, what I saw, Dad, was you're really important here. What I saw is nobody here can make a decision without asking you first. I saw people lined up outside your door all day long asking for you to make a decision for them. Holy cow. In that moment, of course, she was very proud. I was absolutely mortified because I realized in that moment, even though I was this newly minted leader, this is how I got here. I got here by being the smartest guy in the room, by probably drowning out the voice of others. And now I built this hero-based system that can only be scaled by scaling the hero. And the only way to scale a hero is overtime. And I will tell you, I looked at that 8-year-old and I thought, I don't want to wake up 10 years later and realize I missed the best parts of being a dad. And so the easiest place to identify our starting point is actually the hardest place to start. And it's right here. I had to change. I had to become a different kind of leader. I had to start thinking about myself differently and think about the people around me differently. So many people come to me and say, Rich, how can you get them to change? I'm like, no, I'm going to start with you. You need to change. And they're like, no, I'm fine. You just get all these people around me to change and everything will be okay. It's like, oh man, if life were only that simple, right? And so this is hard. This is hard work, but it's important work, and it will be a better life for you in the process as it was for me. Now, a lot of people look at me and say, but Rich, you're the top guy now. You're the CEO, you're the entrepreneur, you're the founder of the company. You get to make decisions. And sure enough, if you're at the top, you can call a nation to the moon and safely back. You can inspire the Peace Corps. You can drive a whole nation forward. But very few people ever get that opportunity. So I want to tell you a different story. I want to tell you a story about Mike. Mike, who works at the McDonald's in Detroit Metro Airport. If you're ever in the McNamara terminal, you probably recognize this McDonald's. Unfortunately, I have a weakness. It's called a quarter pounder with cheese, a large fry, and a Coke. And when I'm in a hurry and I'm running through that airport, I see the McDonald's, it just pulls me in. And all of a sudden I'm in there and I'm sitting down and it's a busy place. It's filled with people who are rushing in and rushing out. And every time I was there was Mike. I could see his badge and he'd be hustling around every table. He was an older guy and he'd be just almost running from table to table, clearing off the stuff that people carelessly left behind, wiping off the crumbs on every table. And I'd be like, wow, what a remarkable guy. How does he bring that energy every day? And I will tell you, every time he got near me, he'd lean in and say, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Have a nice day. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And I thought, wow, what a remarkable guy. Not only to bring that energy at his age, but to bring that ounce of kindness that wasn't necessary, right? I wasn't going to think less of McDonald's because he didn't do that. And then one day he was off shift and I was in there having my quarter pounder with cheese. And this young kid, probably no older than 18, is pulling a sled full of garbage out of the back of the McDonald's heading off to the dumpster. And as he came by my table, he leans in and he says, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And in that moment, I thought, what on earth is going on at this McDonald's? I mean, this is one of the most relationless restaurants on the planet, inside of one of the most relationless places on the planet, a busy international airport. And these guys are doling out kindness and napkins? What's going on here? So I went up to the manager and I thanked him for this. I said, this really actually means a lot to me. This is really nice. And he thanked me for noticing. He said, Rich, this is a really competitive place. I got to beat out Plum Market right across the way here. He said, he thanked me for noticing. And I realized in this story, it's a story you can glom onto, regardless of where you are in your organization. You see, I'm pretty sure that manager didn't call up McDonald's corporate headquarters and say, hey guys, could you form a committee to write a policy on kindness and napkins? No, he just did it. And it didn't cost a thing. and made such a big difference to those they serve. And so those kind of opportunities are available for all of us. You can start right where you are. You can start with you. You can start doling out kindness by just saying good morning to people as they walk into the office. Greet them with a smile. Ask them how their day was. Every one of us has that kind of opportunity inside of us. And then finally, the message I'm going to leave to you is this. Take action over take a meeting. Run the experiment. Try things before you just simply defeat them. Too often when you bring a new idea to work, somebody looks at, oh, we've tried that before, it never worked, or that won't work here, that's against policy. And then the idea usually dies on the vine. I want to arm you with a simple statement when that happens. Look them in the eye and say, I get it, but let's try it before we defeat it. Let's run the experiment. Now, one of our more famous experiments involves little babies. Yeah, 13 years ago, Tracy had little Maggie. She was off on maternity leave. She was ready to come back to work. And she couldn't because grandparents lived too far away to help, and daycare was actually full right now. And so they didn't know what to do. And she came in to talk to me about it. And I will tell you, in that moment, in that conversation with Tracy, the mom, there was a screaming match in my brain. You know, the bright voice, dark voice kind? The dark voice said, don't you dare say what you're about to say. HR will shoot you. The lawyers will freak. The insurance policy will go through the roof. The bright voice said, it's your company. You can do whatever you want. You're an entrepreneur now. You don't even have an HR department. And so I looked at Tracy, I said, bring her in. And the look on her face, if I'd only had a camera, she looked at me, she's like, what do you mean? I said, bring her into work. She said, all day? I said, sure. She said, every day? I said, why not? And she looked around the big open room that's Menlo, because this was not an offer to build a daycare. The baby was going to be with the parent all day long. She said, Rich, where will I put her? I said, Tracy, she's 3 months old. She's not going anywhere. Put her in a front pack, put her in a bassinet on the floor, pack and play. We'll figure it out. She says, but what if she makes a fuss? It'll destroy the ambiance of the whole place. I said, you kidding? This is like a noisy restaurant here. You'll never hear her. She said, come on, Rich, you've raised 3 girls. What if she makes that big baby fuss? And this is where I grew up a little bit as a leader. I looked at her and I said, Tracy, you're the mom. I trust you. You'll do the right thing. We'll work it out together. Let's run the experiment. Now, isn't she adorable? I mean, how can you resist that face, right? Interesting thing enough, that's not little Maggie. It's not Tracy's baby, that's Ellie. Ellie is Menlo baby number 8. This has been a wonderful experiment for us. Now, when you run experiments, especially if it involves little humans, expect the unexpected. Did little Maggie fuss when we brought in? Of course she did. It was the team's response we didn't expect. The team literally created a sign-up list. They were like, no, it's my turn to hold the baby. These babies are raised by the village. We also found out that Ellie could pair program. Ellie could go to design meetings. We found out that you can actually pair the babies together too. And we found out that this works equally well for introverted and extroverted babies. I'll let you decide which is which by looking at the picture here. This is Josiah on the right and Flynn on the left. Menlo babies number 22 and 23 in the last 13 years. Boy, if you want to cement the relationship with the parents of your team members, let them do stuff like this. The other thing we discovered, our customers actually behave better when you bring babies to meetings. They don't yell at you, they don't swear at you, they don't raise their voice with you. They actually behave nicer, even though the kids might not understand the salty language, but boy, they sure don't bring it. So this has been a wonderful experiment. I get it. You may not be able to bring babies into where you work. It may not be appropriate. That's okay. The point isn't about the babies. The point is run the darn experiment. Now, sure, works in a little team. What about a big team? Let me tell you the story of Mass Mutual Corporation, 180-year-old life insurance company, who heard my message, run the experiment, took it home, brought me back 6 months later to show me what had happened. Amy Ferreira, the VP of Claims at Mass Mutual, took me around the corner into this 100,000 square foot facility of Mass Mutual where they process $3 billion a year in claims every year. And she said, Rich, when we get there and you look into this space, you're going to see helium balloons. And I said, oh, are you celebrating something? Is that a reward for people who've accomplished something big? She goes, no. Based on what you told us about run the experiment, every desk where there is a balloon taped to it is a declaration by the person sitting at that desk that I'm running an experiment and the balloon is here to say, come talk to me about it. I want to tell you what I'm trying. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. What a great idea. And I expected to see a half a dozen balloons. There were balloons as far as the eye could see. There were experiments running everywhere. So I run up to Susan. I said, Susan, tell me about your experiment. She says, well, I'm in charge of quality. I'm the last stop before that check gets cut to the beneficiary. I have 3 steps I have to go through. I have to go through step A, step B, and step C in order to get to the decision point. And if they all pass, then we can send the check. She said, what I realized though was step C, if I find an error there, I actually have to go back and redo step B. So she said, I just switched the order around. My experiment was do A and then C and then B. And I would think, as you probably do, well, that sounds pretty simple. It doesn't sound that big a deal. And she is just beaming while she's telling me this story. I mean, there is so much energy just coming out of her. And I said, Susan, how long have you worked here? She says, 19 years. I said, have you always been like this? And her face turned into a scowl. She goes, no, I hated my job before. I hated coming to work. I was counting the days to retirement. I said, why? What was it like then? She goes, Rich, every decision, every thought I ever had, every idea I ever had to go up 5 levels, over and down 5 levels, and then come back. And every idea I ever had died on the vine. Can you hear policy, committee, bureaucracy in that statement? She says, now we can run the experiment. Now I love my job. I can't wait to get to work. Think about that. $30 billion a year, 180-year-old life insurance company made these kind of changes inside of 6 months. This is my statement to you. I'm not letting you off the hook. Yep, Menlo can do it at our size and nature. So can a 180-year-old company. So can you. And ultimately, here's the reward. And even the reason I'm here with you today. A little software company in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan, sharing this message of joy and leading with joy with you. And it all comes down to, oh, and by the way, this is Mass Mutual Corporation now. This is what they look like, just not your grandfather's life insurance company. But the story I want to tell you is a story of opportunity that exists for you today and the change you can make in the world. And it boils down to this picture. The gentleman in the orange shirt called me for one of our weekly check-in meetings. And his name is Michael. And he said, hey, Rich, I'm coming in for show and tell. And I want to bring Buster with me. Is that okay? And I said, sure, you can bring whoever you want. Who's Buster? And he said, my Great Dane. Now, we've always had dogs at Menlo, but our clients have not brought their dogs into Menlo. Now, Buster greets me at the front door by putting his paws on my shoulders. I'm 6'5". His head was above mine. It's a gentle giant of a dog. And in this story is the opportunity for all of us. You see, Michael couldn't bring his dog in where he worked. It would not have been appropriate. Nothing wrong with his employer or attitudes about dogs or anything like that. If you knew what he did for a living, you know Michael shouldn't be bringing the dog in. But when Michael interacted with us, he wanted to be more like us. This is the kind of change we can make in the world. Once we create a powerful enough culture, the people we interact with want to be more like us, want to learn how we did it so they can take some piece of that home. That can happen with any organization, and when it does, there is joy in that. So I simply want to appeal to your thinking about the companies you're founding and leading, the ones you're running today, that there is an opportunity, as Raleigh May said, of courage. And courage not being cowardice, the opposite being cowardice, but rather the opposite being conformity. I'm going to urge you to not conform in yours and pursue joy as a fundamental aspect of the culture you're building. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you, Rich. And so for everyone, there is a Q&A chat bubble at the bottom of your window. Feel free to type your questions in there, and I will moderate that. And in the meantime, Rich, thank you very, very much for your willingness to be here with us today. I think your message, having leapt out of the corporate bureaucracy in February of this year, just ahead of a pandemic, after 20 years with IBM, I can relate to a lot of what you said, from that environment. On the phone with us, we've got some founders that range from folks that have founded software companies 20 years ago and are still running them today. And we've got folks that are starting cybersecurity companies down in Traverse City. We've got young, ambitious founders who have moved back to Marquette, Michigan to launch cleanup, space debris cleanup companies to make outer space safer for humanity.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
We've got video game founders, all kinds of folks here. And one thing that it strikes me as a founder of a small business is that you can be under so much pressure to build the presentation, the pitch deck, the financials, to figure out your plan, that you don't think about the importance of culture. And the idea of leading with that culture and figuring out your culture as you go and how you're going to be successful as a company and as a team, come what may, it really stands out for me in your message. So really appreciate that. It looks like we do have a question here from Lee Francisco, who's on with us, wondering whether you had watched a video, Inventions That Shocked the World, on Amazon Prime, which discusses inventions that we take for granted today and how entrepreneurs that invented those still faced struggles but persevered.
I have not, but it sounds fantastic. I'm going to add that to my viewing list immediately.
There's a link here, and we'll pass that link on. From Austin Morris at Cal Morris, the space cleanup company. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are young and have the fear that they should spend decades in their industry getting experience before they attempt to follow their dreams?
Yeah, I often get this question because I do a lot of entrepreneurial mentorship in Ann Arbor, and because our company is nestled right up to the University of Michigan campus, a lot of students will come to me asking the same question, like, when's the right time to start a company? And I will tell you, there's never a right time, and there's always a right time. At the point where you're young and you're inexperienced, you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to take some crazy risks, and who knows, some of them are going to work out. And so that sort of almost hubris of youth, where you just have that endless optimism, can be really valuable. You probably still have the third bedroom in your parents' home, so you can save a lot of money, and mom and dad will cook meals for you and buy groceries, so you can be very capitally efficient at that point. And the other thing is, when I started Menlo, I was 43 years old. And I had always dreamed of being an entrepreneur from probably 14 or 15 years old on. I thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I never thought it would take me till I was 43. And I will tell you, while I had brought a lot of wisdom and experience to it, there was still a lot I had to learn. And I had a tremendous number of responsibilities at that point. I had 3 daughters all lined up to be going into college at that point, house payment, a couple of cars. All the responsibilities of life were on my shoulder. Maybe that motivated me a little bit more, but I think you can be just as successful starting when you're young. But find your mentors, find the people who can advise you, find other people you admire. You can listen to what books they're reading. Ask them questions about what they wish they knew when they were your age, all that sort of thing, and really listen. You don't have to take everybody's advice. I think ultimately a successful entrepreneur knows how to filter that advice and choose what's right for their hearts. But don't try and do it all on your own. Even if you're a solo entrepreneur, build a mentorship network around you. Sounds like you've got some great mentors right up there in Marquette area.
And that's a great plug for what we're doing here today, right? Because it can be in rural areas, in urban areas, in parts of Michigan and across the country. It can be difficult to find your mentors. So that's what the Michigan Virtual Founders Club is about. And we will have some additional features coming out to help connect you and resources available. From RJ Parrish of Lucid Coast, how has Menlo culture translated to remote work? And has it changed any of your thoughts on in-person work?
Yeah, why would you ask that question? Yeah, I mean, I was in San Diego on a flight on March 13th when the president announced the national emergency. And by Monday, we came back and told the team, we don't think we're going to be able to stay working here. So we started sending people home. We'd already anticipated this a little bit in February. So we'd done a couple of send a project home and let it work and see what challenges we ran into. And of course, within the following week, the governor declared stay at home everybody. And so then it would have been illegal to stay in the office. So we honored that, of course. And it's working. It's weird, but it's working. We just had a lunchtime discussion. We've set up this Thursday pattern of, we call it Lunch with Rich and James. And James is my co-founder. And that's a chance for all of us to get together and discuss our hopes, our fears, our dreams, our worries, all that kind of stuff. And so I think for us, this transition to remote work went about as smoothly as it could possibly go. And now we're focusing a tremendous amount on essentially over communicating, making sure we're staying in touch. Now, we still pair because all of our work is done in pairs. So, but it's pairing much like we're doing right now, where we're pairing with computers, we're pairing with Zoom calls, we're pairing with screen sharing, we're pairing with audio sharing and all that sort of thing.
Great. Question from Jeff Nyquist, former CEO and founder of Neurotrainer. I think you've actually met Jeff.
I have met Jeff, yes.
He's back here in Marquette from San Francisco
Yay.
for the summer, and he's actually sitting here behind me somewhere. What advice do you have for a founder who has recently brought on the first gray hair CEO? What should I focus on now? What do I do? How do I be more impactful?
Be gentle with him, Jeff. He's old. He needs all of your support. You know, obviously, building a human relationship with anybody on your team is of paramount importance. Spend time together. Really get to know each other's stories. Learn about each other. I really appreciate the writings of Patrick Lencioni. His book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Getting Naked, The Ideal Team Player. If you look at the theme inside of Lencioni's books and so many others on leadership, it's about being vulnerable, being authentic with the people around you, really getting to know their life story, what makes them tick. Because we're all going to bring unique things to the table. And you may have certain serious and important expectations for this new person you brought on, but they're human too. They have their own life dreams and family obligations and all that sort of thing. So get to know them. Really get to know them, not as a role, not as a title, not as an employee, but get to know them as a human being.
It's great advice and consistent with your whole entire message, Rich. I thank you again, and everyone in the chat. I have placed a link. It is a registration link for a landing page. A quick shout out to Jasmine and Michael Gorski of Jump Team Marketing for their quick turnaround and helping me with a prototype landing page. If you would like to follow that link, you can sign up for updates for future Michigan Virtual Founders Club events. We will soon be launching MichiganVirtualFoundersClub.org, which will have community resources and additional ways to connect and collaborate. Please forward that information, share with your friends and founder ecosystems, because this is only the beginning. And Rich, once again, thank you so much for your willingness to be here and share your message today.
You bet.
Great. Any other questions? We have 2 minutes, 1 minute left. Anyone want to get one final question in? All right. Well, again, thank you, Rich. Thank you, Ray, Innovate Smart Zone, Marquette, and Jennifer Zunko of TC New Tech for co-hosting. We will make available the link to this recording on the website and on our Facebook page. And everyone, have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.